Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the second day of our program. My name is Jelena Trkulja, and this is the second day of Art Basel Conversations, co-presented with Qatar Creates Talks. It is my pleasure to welcome our first panel of today, called From the Ground Up, What Does It Take to Build an Art Market? And I'm delighted to introduce you to Mohammed Hafiz, co-founder and CEO of ATHR Gallery in Jeddah, Isabelle de Caters, gallerist from Dubai, and Sadie Coles, art dealer from London. Our moderator for today is my dear friend and colleague, Coline Milliard, executive editor of Art Basel. Please welcome them.
Thank you, Jelena. Thank you all for being here. And thank you, Isabelle, Sadie, and Mohammed for being with us today. Mohammed, this morning, you told me something which really stayed with me. You said, opening a gallery is a completely irrational thing to do. And Isabelle, when we first spoke, you also said that it was a leap of faith. And yet, gallerists and galleries are really at the core of the art market because they really are the bridge between artists and clients, and their impact ripples far beyond the gallery itself. Why? Because gallerists are really market makers. Whether they operate in established art hubs like London or in younger ones that are in becoming, to pick up on the theme of this edition, they really nurture a network of patrons, institutions, and peers. The gallery-to-gallery relationship is very important, as we'll see. That is essential to the artists they represent, of course, but not only. These networks have an impact on the entire ecosystem, all the way to education, professionalization, and really institutions sometimes themselves. This is a fundamental, structural mechanism of the art market, and yet it's rarely examined. So today, we're going to open the bonnet of the gallery business and really ask, what does it take to build an art market? How has this process evolved over the last 30 years? And what can we learn from this evolution? So to explore this, I'm really delighted to have three gallery founders. Isabelle, the founder of Gallery. Isabelle, you opened your first gallery in Dubai in 2003, where I think it's fair to say there was not that many galleries at the time. Sadie Coles, the founder of Sadie Coles HQ in London, which opened in 1997, and Mohammed Hafiz, the co-founder of Arthur's, with 3 locations in Saudi Arabia, which first opened in 2009. Welcome all. You've been really busy recently, and I'm not just talking about the fair, I'm just talking about the way your galleries have evolved. I mean, Sadie, you just opened this incredible townhouse in the center of London on Savile Row. Isabelle, you relaunched the gallery. Mohammed, you've opened new spaces, you started a foundation, a consultancy, even the first high-tech storage facility in Saudi Arabia with the German company Hasenkamp. So maybe just to set the scene and help our audience get to know you a little bit better, could you just briefly tell us the story of the gallery and set the scene, paint a picture? What was the art world in your location like when you started? Maybe with you, Isabelle.
Does it work? Oh, yeah. Hello. So yes, my story is very organic. Actually, I started traveling in Iran, where I met with extraordinary people and artists, and these people had no platform, really, but they had so many things to express, and I was very impressed by how much I knew about Iranian people through the media and the general media and what I discovered there. And I realized that all these thematics were the same, but they would express it within their context. And they've opened up, all their sensibilities. And it has really been an enlightening experience for me. So I started traveling there more and more and carrying works from Tehran to Dubai. First, I showed them to friends in my living room, and then, you know, found a majlis or a satellite, you know, unconventional places to try to organize exhibitions, which I had a little experience before. As in Brussels, I opened, when I was a student, a place called 20 square meters of contemporary art. That was literally 20 square meters. And yeah, and that is how it started, really.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mohammed, can you tell us?
Thank you. So I want to start by saying thank you all for taking the time and coming here to listen to us share our you know, experiences, views, and thoughts. I know it's kind of busy out there, and we really appreciate that. And thank you for inviting us and giving us this platform. So my story is a bit long, and I don't have enough time, but it kind of I got several times kind of crossing with art and artists. And I'm very lucky that one of them is sitting in the audience, Ahmed Mater. He was like one of the introductions I had to the art world. And the conversations it started, the thinking process, the way art kind of talks to so many people, and it lowers all the barriers of different cultures, languages, backgrounds. I found that fascinating, and you know, thought, how can I be part of this world? And it all started with an adventure in Art Dubai. It was where the gallery was born, in an art fair, one like this one. And then worked with Ahmed on programs like Edge of Arabia and other social projects. So what we did was kind of more in between both. And, you know, it's amazing, a world where you keep learning and meeting amazing, fascinating people, exchanging thought and ideas, working with brilliant creative artists. It's just, you know, keeps you want to learn and explore. And I think that's why and how we started.
Sadie, your story is different. You were an experienced art dealer when you opened your own gallery.
Yeah, my story is very long, so I'm not going to bore you with it. But what I would say is that I'm an art dealer because artists are always the most exciting person in the room for me, and for all of us, I'm sure that's true. And I started because I was told by artists that I'd already been friends with to open a gallery. So even though I had no business experience, that's why I began my journey. I had already had quite a lot of training with a big gallery in London, Anthony Doffey, who was set a very high bar in terms of the quality of what he was doing in terms of the exhibitions, the publications, the program itself. So that was a very good training ground. And then I opened a small gallery in London, and I've pretty much stayed there.
Your experience is very different. You open in London, like the birthplace of the modern kind of art dealership in the 18th century. So unlike Dubai and Jeddah, it was a mature market. And yet, the contemporary art world, I mean, the saying goes that, you know, everyone could fit in a pub at the time. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
When I opened, the 1990s was a very dynamic time in London because there was a huge generational shift. So until that point, it had been very much a place for secondary market old master dealing. And the contemporary section was kind of modern British, the pop generation, really, all around Cork Street. So when I opened, and a lot of other galleries opened, we all opened in the same decade, so White Cube and many of the British galleries who remain my colleagues today, that was a generational shift, and that was led by the artists. So Damien Hirst, Sarah Lucas, Tracy Emin, all those people are my peers and were my friends. We were literally all in the same pub together pretty much every night. So it felt like this incredibly exciting, pivotal moment. And interestingly enough, London feels now, today, in 2026, that it's at the same moment. There is now a new generation of gallerists and artists in their late 20s who are opening small spaces in London and reinventing things all over again. And I'm very happy that that's happening.
What's extraordinary about you three is that you've been working for long enough to have really followed a history or an arc of development in your respective kind of location. I'm thinking Dubai in 2003 to Dubai today is a completely different space. Maybe can you tell us, Isabelle, how do you think the market has changed since you started to operate?
Well, in Dubai, it has changed tremendously, and I'm very admirative for the vision of all the actors. And so you have really distinct strategies across the three Emirates. So Sharjah is very, it has its Biennale, it has all these wonderful exhibitions, the March meetings. So it's really a center for exchanging ideas. And you have like Abu Dhabi that has the strategy with, big museums, Louvre, Guggenheim Abu Dhabi is going to open soon, and also the Sheikh Zayed National Museum opened. So, and then you have Dubai that is more focused on the galleries, the business aspect, but we have a very grassrooted community. It's also a very small community. Everybody knows each other, and now we have residencies, we have a lot of galleries. So my gallery is based in Al Serkal. I think in the beginning we were 3 of us, and now there's 15 galleries, and they keep coming, and that's lovely. So it has changed tremendously, and it's wonderful.
And what about from the collector side? Because obviously it's a dance, isn't it? It's the galleries grows, but the collectors get interested. They get interested in the artist. They learn through the gallery. I think it's always important to remind how much of an educational almost body the gallery can be for a collector base and kind of beyond. In Saudi Arabia, Mohammed, how has that changed since that moment? And how do you think ATHR has contributed to that? You also have a consultancy where you work with governments on major projects.
We do. I find it very exciting to be in this space, in a space that's developing and evolving so fast. And it's kind of when we first started with Isabelle and the OGs in this part of the world, it's a greenfield situation. So there's definitely interest. Art's been around in our part of the world for a long time. So people are buy, collect, they collect different things. But I think that the contemporary scene is building up and developing. And I hear, some of the conversations I had in the past days, like the too many fairs happening in the region, or a lot of museums, or where's the market going? And I think there's a lot of space for much, much more. And collectors are engaging faster. Artists, we find ourselves under pressure from artists that want to be represented because the galleries are not opening as fast as the artists are maturing and graduating and practicing. And it's a never-ending dance, as you just said. It's between the artists, the gallerists, and the collectors. Mm-hmm.
Well, it really brings to mind a comment that Sheikh Al-Mayasa did in Basel when she was asked this question, but isn't there a little bit too many museums in the Gulf? Like, are you going to be in competition with each other? And her response was that competition is a Western concept, and you don't say of Rome and Paris and London that there's too many museums, and Tate is going to cast a shadow on the Pompidou Center. And the idea of the Gulf kind of growing together with more and more seems to be still very much on this journey. But there is also this idea of the market changing via technology. Sadie, I want you to kind of go back to something you said this morning about the role of the internet, which I hadn't quite considered in its true impact. So you have the benefit of the longer view.
I'm so old, yeah.
So tell us about what did the internet change for the art market, and how maybe somehow it kind of led us to where we are today.
So when I first started 40 years ago in this business, we had telex, which was like this little paper thing that came out. That was it. And then maybe a year into working, we had a fax machine. But the internet basically has really changed so many things. It's the biggest change agent in the art market, as far as I'm concerned. Basically, it means that you can be a young person sitting in your bedroom here and access what I'm doing in my gallery and learn about the artists in my gallery or in my colleagues' galleries. It has made information flow so fast. It's made the art world much more open and transparent and democratic. So in many ways, that's been incredible. But it's also made things twice, like 10 times as fast. And that's a challenge, I would say, in that it was interesting, you said that Rachel Whiteread in her talk was saying how important it is for artists to make space for their work, to slow down. Well, for gallerists it is as well, because we all need time to think carefully about our program and what we're trying to achieve for our artists, and the speed in which art fairs crop up, the turn of shows in our own spaces and the amount of traveling we're doing in order to meet clients in the various locations around the world, that's intense, yeah.
You talk about challenges, and another challenge is that or one of the many that a gallery can face, particularly in more nascent region. Mohammed, you mentioned that is artists and collectors connecting kind of beyond the gallery ecosystem, and maybe buyers not always understanding the incredible added value that a gallery can bring because of their role as a tastemaker, as a filter, as a nurturer of artists. Why is that detrimental? And maybe Isabelle and Mohammed, you want to particularly address that, particularly in a nascent market, this idea of going straight to the artist. Why should people buy from a gallery? What's the point? Why shouldn't we cut the middleman?
We have good coffee.
That's one. Good reason.
I think it's an interesting question in a developing market. You can, of course, anyone can buy from anyone they want, and an artist can sell through a gallery or not, and a collector can choose where they want to buy their art from. But I'm personally, I buy sometimes from some colleagues, and I think what the role that a gallery does in looking at an artist, before deciding to represent an artist personally, we go through a lot of conversations, we look at the artist practice, we put a lot of energy and investment behind that. And for a collector or someone who wants to engage with the work and work with that, we do a lot of support with museums, institutions, curators, the outreach. So all of this kind of builds around an ecosystem that is not only a transactional relationship. We're in it for the long game with the artists and with our collectors and the foundations. So I think it goes beyond that. And the understanding of these elements that build up the ecosystem in an emerging market is extremely important. And with a fair like Art Basel Qatar, this brings the collectors closer to the ecosystem and the understanding of the dynamics.
I mean, you mentioned, Isabelle, do you want to react to this?
Well, every artist is different, but I would say that with each artist, you're kind of married. And you need to keep seducing each other until, to not end or fall out of love. But every artist is different. For example, Hassan Sharif that we're showing here, he was not interested in whatever would happen beyond the walls of his studio. So he would say, I would, suggest a kind of framing, title for a show or whatever. He was totally detached. He says, from here on, you take over. So, but yes, so
that's
a couple. It's a couple. Every artist is different.
In a way, because you had this moment where you took some, artistic decisions. Some artists will be very precise about their framing, but you went all the way to maybe a title of a show, to suggesting some presentation. So in a way, your role goes at almost completing the work of finishing it, so it's ready to be encountering its public outside the studio.
Well, it makes me study even more the philosophy of the artist to make sure I stay loyal to, you know, their intention. It just increases the responsibility to do something really truthful to the artist.
So, interesting, on this very stage yesterday, Shawky and Rachel Reed were describing the artist as a translator. But I think the gallerist is also a translator. It's this mediator between the studio and the wider world. And I guess you also advise artists back on, you know, how their work should be presented in the best possible way. Do you recognize yourself as translators in the same way, maybe, Sadie?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is we're the business side of this, but actually it's all about communicating. It's a one-on-one relationship that you have both with the artist, but also with the collectors, with the critics, with the museum people. And basically, as a dealer, I feel very much that my responsibility is to communicate what the artist is trying to say, but also to present the work in the very best way, to help the artist with their ambition for their work, whether it's in terms of production or where they want to show or what they want to do next. But, and to communicate that excitement that I'm feeling about somebody's work to whoever I'm in conversation with. It's like throwing a rock in a pond. You hope that those ripples will continue forever and grow the market for the artists that you're working with.
Talking of growing the market, and maybe to change gear ever so slightly, I'm very mindful of where we are today. We're here sitting during the first edition of Art Basel Qatar. From an Art Basel point of view, this is a tremendous landmark. But it's also interesting if we look at the model of art fairs itself. I mean, this is very different from, say, the traditional art fairs model. We have less galleries, we only have solo presentation, we have monumental commissions by Art Basel. We've never done that on that scale. How does that, you as gallerists, kind of inspire you to maybe experiment differently? Like, can you just tell us a little bit about your experience of this Art Basel Qatar year one, and how do you keep this spirit of experimentation in your own business?
Okay. I think the solo exhibition, first of all, for me as a collector, because I also collect, it's actually, and I'm sure for you as the audience, it's been, it makes for a very satisfying experience. It's not as overwhelming, perhaps, as a much bigger fair, and that's very useful in a emerging market because it makes, actually, the director of the Guggenheim, Abu Dhabi, said yesterday that the solo presentation booths allow space for learning, which I think is really a very interesting comment, because it certainly means that as a art dealer, you are able to talk about the project that you're presenting, about the artist's work in a much more complete way than you can when you're trying to explain 30 works on the wall on your booth. So actually, that has been a very special experience for us, I think.
Isabelle?
Well, I was immediately excited about the format because I love this idea of, you know, thinking of a meaningful presentation and being able to introduce properly the practice of an artist. So, yeah, exactly the same. We do spend a lot of time now on the booth, like talking in depth about this specific artist. So, while when you have a lot of artists, you might discuss some artists, or the visitor might see many things, but it's overwhelming. You don't really focus. So I think it's wonderful. I immediately applied.
Mohammed, do you want to respond to that?
I think Sadie and Isabelle kind of covered most of the angles, or all of the important angles about this. But I think seeing a lot of our friends coming from many different places, a word has been repeating quite frequently in this fair more than any other one, which is the learning component. I hear a lot of our friends, audience, saying, you know, we've learned a lot, we've seen a lot, and you don't see that in many of the other fairs. You feel it's less transactional, it's more about the exploration, and then the deal or the acquisition can happen beyond that. But I think it's a very nice idea and a very effective one.
I mean, it also speaks to a broader trend that we see in this industry, is that we all grappling with a new generation coming in, a generation of buyers, generations of artists, generation of dealers. We were speaking, Sadie, earlier about how extremely exciting it is to see, for instance, in London, so many very young gallerists trying new things, and despite the challenging economic climate, really going for it. So what we're seeing is like a whole reinvention from within, from the galleries. We see artists pushing the boundaries of a traditional representation model, for example. We see galleries merging, we see galleries co-presenting at fairs. So all these things that 15 years ago would have been a major no, we cannot do this. It's like, now it becomes possible. It's like, why? So I guess my question to you, maybe Mohammed, continue, like, how do you push this spirit of experimentation? I mean, you're not shy in this domain, and maybe are there times where artists invite you or push you in direction that you haven't kind of anticipated?
I think the artists are the anchor for those out-of-the-box ideas. They are artists. They create amazing experiences, objects from, I find it, very exciting, their ability to create. And because we work with artists, we approach this whole situation with complete flexibility. I think it's important to accommodate the changes, the evolutions of a scene, of a market. And we've done that, as we've discussed. We do a little bit of consultancy, a little bit of production, some logistics, and 3 gallery spaces. And because we find ourselves in a market that's opening up. When we first started, art was so kind of marginal in Saudi Arabia. With the inception of the Ministry of Culture, the Vision 2030, the focus, the launch of so many museums, the market has evolved, and it required us to do things differently, and it's important to stay flexible.
Isabelle, have you seen this generational shift in Dubai as well? Like the new people coming in, the people who, when you started, were not ready to collect, kind of maturing, and how have you adapted perhaps to that as well?
The question is about the audience that has changed?
Yeah, the changing collector kind of habit and expectations as well.
Well, I'm referring a lot to the artist that we're showing now on the booth, Hassan Sharif, and when he came back from London, he came back with all these teachings about conceptual art, the ready-mades, fluxus, British constructionism. So he decided to come back with all this knowledge, but there was nothing basically in Dubai. So there was 2 books at the library, one about Cézanne and one about Van Gogh. So he always said that not only he needed to create his art, but he needed to create his audience as well. And we've been really through with the gallery. There was almost nothing, when I started. And so I'm just grateful to the UAE for, how curious they have been for, my little organization and the things that I was trying to bring to their attention. It has been so much supported, so much interest and curiosity, and then, as I said, it's been taken over. We have indeed had different waves of collector, like a very enthusiast moment for Iranian art, and then this had totally disappeared. I think that the auction houses came a bit too early in the UAE because it didn't help artists, some artists that have seen incredible things happening to them, but without, going hand in hand with, their biography. So, speed can also be dangerous. We need to keep things balanced.
Yeah, and that we kind of really meet what you were saying, Sadie, about speed is at the same time a fantastic opportunity to connect, to travel, to do more, and at the same time it sort of can be a danger. I was wondering, how do this kind of changing generation, their taste, maybe their expectation, is impacting your program specifically?
I think one of the big things about being an art dealer and thinking about your program is to try and connect with what people are wanting, what people need, because if you know, and work with artists around that, because I want to continue to reinvent my program so that it reflects the society that I live in and the artists that I'm working with. And over the last 3 or 4 years, we've shown a lot more moving image, for instance, because that appeals to a younger generation. I think artists interpret the world for us, they reimagine the world for us, and they're often now using different tools to 30, 40 years ago. So I think that's really, really interesting. There has been a lot of development, obviously, around digital technology in the art world, and that's something that I'm kind of very conscious of.
What's been interesting as well is that there is a readiness and appetite, but readiness here is a key term, that in more mature market, this idea of collecting digital works or moving image is not necessarily an issue. People know what to do with it. They understand that it's an artwork. Mohammed, I understand that sometimes the challenge that you might have with some of your more experimental practices in a more nascent market. Maybe you want to develop on that a little bit.
We kind of touched on that this morning, and the differences between the context that Sadie's coming from and where we are. It's like she's from the capital of the art market, and the art museums, institutions, collectors, they've been there for so long and they've evolved with that market. In our instance, we're still building up the interest. So maybe the moving image comes as a challenge, and I found that duality quite interesting, that we still, I don't think we've sold many moving image artworks.
Yet.
Yes, but when you see the dynamics around, honestly, this week, I have a lot of positive expectations.
That really also touched on this idea of education, and one way to cultivate education, of course, beyond the gallery itself, is through the museums. And I think that's an aspect of a gallery's work that is perhaps lesser known, is how important they are in supporting artists to have exhibitions in museum, whether it's directly financially supporting the exhibition, but also sometimes simply by introducing, connecting, making sure that the work is in front of the right curator's eyes at the right time, being aware of museums' interest and so on. It's an interesting proposition in a context like Dubai, for example, where when you started, and to this day, the institutional network is still in becoming. So how did you address that when you started, Isabelle? This idea of like, I want to build a legitimacy for my artists, they need to have museum shows, I operate in a market which doesn't quite have that. That was a challenge when you started. What did you do?
Well,
you go beyond.
No, I was just, working hand in hand with the artists, trying to, present a relevant program and challenging exhibitions, hopefully disrupting what people would expect to see, and creating space for, exchanging and connecting, and really just hoping for the ripple effect you were talking, and just like sticking to my grounds and the creativity of the artists and the gallery.
So in a way, the gallery became almost the force of proposition, like the exhibition that you couldn't have in the museum, you just did it yourself.
Well, in Dubai, because we have no museum, now we have the Jamil Center, which is a wonderful place, and they have announced the Duma, which hopefully will come soon. But the galleries had like a huge footfall, the appetite. We have immediately seen that a huge, traffic in galleries. So it was impressive to see, this appetite. And it continues to be so. So the galleries, like, every day we have like between 50 and 100 people coming to this industrial area where we are located just to see the shows in the galleries.
So this touches on a really interesting point, is that the gallery can almost be a relay for the museum. And in places where you have less museum, they become the museum, or they become to take a European model, the Kunstverein, the Kunsthalle, the place for experimentation. I think Jerry Saltz described galleries as the labs of art history. This is where it happens before it kind of goes on. Nonetheless, you and Mohammed, you've worked very internationally from the beginning as well. It looked like, well, if it's not happening at home, then we're going to go to the world. And Sadie, in a different way, you always had a very strong connection to the US, which is reflected in your program, and also to mainland Europe. So whoever wants to take this one, why is it important, whilst you're operating from a base, to cultivate these international networks, and are there maybe limits to that as well? Don't know who wants to go. Maybe Sadie?
I think as our world has shrunk because of the internet and because of travel, it's collaboration with my colleagues internationally is more important than ever. Coming up with ways to collaborate is also really fantastic. We have this thing in London called Condo, where that Vanessa Carlos, who's a younger gallery in London, invented, and it's an invitational where galleries in London host another gallery. It's on right now in London, and that's an initiative which is fantastic. When you do something like that, and say a residency at the fire station here, for instance, basically it's like it's a germinal for cross communication, and it inspires not just your collectors and museums, but also artists as well. If you get this wonderful, it starts something, things begin to grow from it. So I think collaboration of any sort can take you in a surprising direction, but it will for sure create something new.
And you said this morning, this is a person-to-person business. So we need to see each other. I mean, during COVID, there was a lot of talk about how everything was going to be so different. And we were going to stop traveling and all stay at home, and enough of it. And what we've seen since, luckily the pandemic kind of ended, is that it came back with a vengeance. Why? Because we just want to be together. And for you, Mohammed, for instance, from the get-go, you opened in 2009, and you go out. You go to all the fairs, probably, then you refine the thing, but the idea is that you had to meet people. Why is this important to do that, and perhaps offered you things that you couldn't find in Saudi Arabia back at the time?
When, at the time, Saudi, you couldn't visit Saudi. There was no visit visa or tourist visa option to apply to when we first opened. So reaching out was the only way we could share our voices with the rest of the world, or one of the most impactful ones. But I think it's important to balance being rooted where you're coming from and staying true to where you started, as for me as a gallerist or the artist I work with, yet having a global conversation and sharing something that is relevant to the rest of the world. And finding that balance is, I think, has the biggest impact in what we do.
Did you feel like going away changed the perception of, say, your network at home? Did people look at you differently because of those international activities?
Absolutely,
yes?
Yeah.
And for you, Isabelle, you also went quite international at the beginning.
Yes, but we always have had a lot of international visitors coming to Dubai. Yes.
And I guess this has only accelerated recently.
It has been a continuous growth. Yeah.
Talking of growth, I was, reading an interview with you, Sadie, recently, where you talked about doubling down on London. You've made this incredible statement with this beautiful townhouse, which has a feel of a little museum. You've got several levels, and you really have a journey through the exhibition spaces. You were all born as gallerists at the time of exponential globalization in terms of world history, and yet so far you're only operating in your own kind of home country, and this was a decision at some point. Why? Maybe Sadie, can you tell us about that?
I think I mean, I admire my colleagues who've opened branches in many different locations. I admire their ambition for their galleries. But my version of my gallery is very personal. I wanted to stay authentic. And if I had a satellite somewhere, it wouldn't feel like it was totally authentic. And I love my home city. And I believe that it's better for me to articulate what the artists are doing in a location that I really, really understand. So it's been very meaningful for me to stay in London.
Isabelle, do you want to, because I know that you at some point considered Brussels.
Yes, so at some point I was lucky to, acquire a space in Brussels, and I was, of course, extremely excited about the artists that we represented, and I wanted to share in my home country. Also, I arrived in Dubai in 2002, and I thought I would stay there for 2 years, yet now we're 24 years later, I'm still there. So, but then, as the space was there, I realized that I wouldn't be able to have, I didn't want the Brussels space to just become an outpost of what I do in Brussels, and that every space needs to have its very own program that is exchanging with the local community, growing through, conversation like a rhizome, and have its beautiful, authentic raison d'être. So anyway, yes, I thought it would just be maybe an outpost or repetition, and I want each space to have its own reason to be, yes.
Here we really touch on something which, again, people perhaps don't really fully appreciate, is how personal a business that is. There's not one gallery model, that one way to do business which kind of fits all. And I mean, Mohammed, you've got a very different approach. You've just opened 2 new outposts, and I hear that you might be contemplating others. So you're taking a different route. Can you tell us about that?
We decided to take a different route. So we have three spaces in Saudi Arabia. We're looking at maybe space in Abu Dhabi, and not long after that, somewhere in Europe. And I think my experience was, when we took our conversations to different places, it had bigger impact. I can see the challenges that both, the direction that both Isabelle and Sadie are taking. And my view is now I have to try it and experience it. And there's no harm in making mistakes and taking steps back, or doing the right thing and doubling down on it. And we're going to take that step and go through the adventure and hope for the best, and for all your support.
So really points to this idea of experimenting, supporting the experimentation of others, your artists, but also experimenting yourself, and daring to take that step. From the first moment of opening the doors, it's always a leap of faith, as you said, Isabelle, and then continuing this experiment. We are almost running out of time, but I want you to finish with a little lightning round, quick responses. So off we go. I'm going to go down the line. What is your biggest challenge today, Isabelle? You cannot have any, in which case I'd be thrilled for you.
Can we start with Sadie? She
Mohammed.
has more experience than me.
Biggest challenge, the unavailability of cloning technology. I have to travel so many places, do artist studio visits, art fairs, exhibitions, this, that, and the other. By the way, I have 6 kids, and some in uni, some in school. I missed I missed my son's play because I was in a biennale. I missed a sports day because I was in an art fair. So, biggest challenge, cloning. Second one.
Sadie.
I mean, mine is the same. Yeah. Yes. Mine is definitely the same. It's time. It's time. Like, we all need more time. Thank God motherhood is behind me. But I'm leaving today to go to see my son's fashion show at college tomorrow. So, it's the same stuff.
Very good. You all have now the benefit of insights. What do you wish you'd known when you started? Maybe I'll stay with you, Sadie.
I wish I'd known how addictive it was. Like, being with artists is incredible, and I wish I'd known that I would never be able to get off this hamster wheel. It's addictive.
Isabelle.
Well, no, I'm happy for everything that I've learned, you know, through the journey and going with the flow.
Mohammed, what do you wish you'd known in 2008?
Yeah, that's the addiction. It's like you can't go into this world for a year and step out.
No.
If you're in it for life.
You're hooked for life.
And actually, if we're communicating that to collectors here at the fair today, that's a job well done.
And maybe a parting thought, since you've been through the process and we talked about young galleries opening in London, if you could give them like one piece of advice, like remember to...
Well, I'm going to quote you, Mohammed. You gave me a very good piece of advice a year and a half ago, and he told me the name of the game is patience.
Very good. Which links back to Rachel. Mohammed, do you want to build on that?
I'm going to double down on my quote.
Sadie, closing thoughts?
Never borrow money from anyone.
Try
and do it all by yourself.
Thank you, Sadie. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Isabelle. A big round of applause.
I would like to thank all of our panelists, Sadie, Mohammed, Isabelle, and of course our wonderful moderator, Coline, for this great discussion. And I would like to invite all of you to come back in an hour. We will have one more panel today at 3:15. And the topic is Rubaya, Bukhara, and Jau, new platforms, new possibilities. Hope to see you later. Thank you.